Hello to all my Erudite friends out there. My name is Jeff Kowalk, and welcome back to another episode of Erudite Magic. Today's episode is very special to me because we're going to be talking about another book from one of my favorite authors in all of card magic. That's right, I'm talking about Nick Trost. If you don't already know, here's the quick recap. Nick Trost has been publishing card tricks for a very long time. Unfortunately, he was prematurely taken from us in October of 2008, right as the second volume in this series was getting ready to be published. I am, of course, referring to the Subtle Card Creation series, and Nick Trost laid these out before his passing so that they could be published posthumously. We're now up to Volume 8. Who is this book for? It's not going to be for your parlor performers so much as your close-up performers, people who perform in intimate environments with a pack of playing cards or ESP cards, occasionally some dice or other props. I feel like that encompasses most of magicians, so if you're the kind of casual performer who likes to perform for friends, family, and coworkers, this book is going to be right up your alley. H&R Books has been publishing this series since 2008, and again, it's been laid out in, I believe, what's going to be 9 separate volumes. Some of the early ones are out of print, but of course, the later ones have just come out and they have a ton of great card magic. Let's get into talking about this book. When I approach this topic, I'm going to have to talk about it in 2 different ways. The first way is as an individual book, and the second way is going to be as a series, because I don't think that you can take one in isolation and say, you can't really evaluate on its own merits. Most of the time it stands with the others in solidarity. But I am going to focus my comments on this specific volume while giving you an overview of the entire series. The first volume, you should know, has a very large appendix in the back full of different sleights. I'm going to talk about that more when it comes to Volume 8 here in a second. Unfortunately, the first volume is largely out of print. I think you can occasionally find a copy from the used market, but you're not going to be able to find very many new copies floating around anymore. In the introduction to Volume 1, Nick tells you right away that his goal has been to get the maximum effect with a minimum of effort. So these books are going to be very similar to the Steve Beam Semi-Automatic Card Series, Marty Kane's book, Chicanery, and others along those same lines where the methods are pretty simple, but it's the presentations and the magic that shines through regardless of the method. He goes on to say that most of the tricks require little or no sleight of hand, and I can vouch for that. Nick tells us that his approach in inventing new tricks has been to start with a method and work forward to an effect, not the other way around. Part of the reason that you have to take the whole series together is because they are a continuation. In other words, the numbering continues from Volume 1 all the way through the end. This book covers chapters 83 through 95, for example. And the page numbers are in the thousands because although this book does not contain thousands of pages, it is continuing on from Book 1. Volume 8 covers select card secrets, coincidences, court card capers, further poker puzzlers, gambling tricks, divinations, predictions. Gilbreth Plays Poker, Part 5. Really cool stuff there. Still more triple dealing effects, more ESP tests, which, by the way, Nick claims that he was the first person to publish an entire book of nothing but ESP card tricks back in 1965. So he certainly knows what he's talking about when it comes to ESP tricks. Cards and Diceptions, which is a mixture of cards with dice. Still more pinochle puzzlers, and more miracles with cards. This version also has a small appendix in the back. It's not the same as Book 1's appendix. Volume 1's appendix was a very large collection of sleights and moves. This appendix is much, much smaller. All of these sleights were actually in the first book's appendix, except for the Equalizer Shuffle. I'm not going to get into what that is, but my point is, while he describes 6 or 7 different sleights in this appendix, they're already in the first book. Not only that, there were elements where he's describing sleights in the book that I felt like would have been better in the appendix and referring you there, but he doesn't do that. It's confusing to me why certain sleights made the cut to go in the appendix and others were described over and over again within the tricks themselves. Also, I should point out that other than Volume 1, this is the only one with an appendix. So I don't really understand why this volume got its own appendix and whether that will be status quo moving forward, but volumes 2 through 7 don't have it, just for you to know. Let me get the bad out of the way here. There's nothing terrible with this. I love this book, and I love anything by Nick Trost. I think it's well worth your time to study. If you have a good notebook with pen and paper, you're always going to walk away from a Nick Trost book with tons of ideas going through your head about how you can present some effective card magic. You'll learn new sleights, you'll learn subtleties, you'll learn plots, and you'll think about taking things in different directions. Maybe a card trick with ESP cards instead of playing cards, or blank cards, or jokers, or things like that. You're always going to walk away with new ideas, and that's what I love about reading a Nick Trost book. In fact, Roberto Giobbi in Card College Volume 1 has a great quote about Nick Trost. He says, "This methodologically simple but astonishing and extremely deceptive trick is the creation of American magician Nick Trost, who constantly surprises his colleagues with direct effects using simple methods." I don't think there's a better summary from a better expert about the value that Nick Trost brings to the table. It would be impossible for me to go through every trick in Volume 8, even though it's one of the smaller volumes in the series, but let me give you a few highlights. 3 matched pairs on page 1818 is a stand-up version of Gemini twins using 3 different participants. If you do like to perform story tricks, as many people do, using the cards as metaphor for something else, Court Card Capers is an entire section full of stories about love and relationships, but with some interesting and surprising magical twists to them. Nick gives you a basic presentation, but it's left up to you to flesh out exactly how you'd like to present it. There's plenty there for you to have a plot that you can present, but if you want to create an interesting story, you can easily do so, and because of the methods being so simple, you can focus completely on your presentation. Page 1845, The Dead Man's Hand, again, is a really neat story trick about Wild Bill Hickok and how he ultimately ended up getting shot. While not historically accurate, it is a lot of fun. The gambling tricks section is not exactly what you'd think. When I think of gambling, I think of poker, but that's its own section. Many of the gambling tricks have to do with euchre, rummy, or gin rummy, which in today's modern world, I don't think as many people know those games. Of course, your mileage may vary depending on your audience, but for me, I know euchre. I don't really know rummy or gin rummy that well. So it probably wouldn't play for my audiences, partly because I don't know it, but my audiences don't either. That doesn't make this section worthless. I just want you to know that you may or may not be able to take them straight out of the book and perform them. You may have to translate them into other games for your own use. The section on Gilbreth Plays Poker, Part 5, is incredible to me. There's a great addition in this book that isn't in some of the other books that talk about Gilbreth Plays Poker. That is the Steve Beam overhand shuffle procedure to set the deck for the Gilbreth principle when the spectator performs a riffle shuffle on the table. Cheater's Delight on page 1889 is a really cool poker deal demonstration which starts with a shuffled deck, allows you to overhand shuffle the deck, the participant to riffle shuffle the deck, and you're still able to give 2 different climaxes for a poker deal in a very entertaining presentation. Oh, and it's not difficult to do. Overall, I think that for the price, I think this book is about $45 to $50, represents a really great value for the money. If you're looking for close-up card tricks and you're willing to work through the book with cards in hand, you'll definitely find some gold that you can perform. I highly, highly recommend the series overall because there are so many tricks, and Nick Trost has a way with describing that, to me, stems from the early days of Animan. It's a concise but efficient use of words to describe the method and the plot involved. Not only that, but the crediting is also very top-notch but simple. He's always going to tell you where he got the idea for this method or this plot and how he applied it from what they started with to what he's giving you here with the cards. There's some history. He tells you about the origins of when something first saw print and where you can find more information, but there's not a huge bibliography in the back. Each trick stands on its own to tell you where he got the information, what pieces he combined, who created it, and where you can find more information. Anyone who's used to magic books will recognize the artwork of Tony Dunn, who did all of the hand drawings, and they are absolutely gorgeous in this book. You'll have no trouble learning, enjoying, and using this magic. So what's my recommendation? My recommendation is that if you can get the whole series, then you should. If you can't, I do think that this is a pretty good volume since it has that small appendix and it has a lot of really cool information about Gilbreth playing poker. Bringing us full circle here, earlier I mentioned that some of the earlier volumes were out of print, and they're probably some of my favorites. The books are thicker, there's a lot more material there, but there's certainly nothing wrong with this one, and you can get this one now. So if you're going to try to collect them, I would consider starting with the most recent ones, see if the material's for you, and then work your way backwards and fill in the complete set, whether that be on the used market or if you can find them new, that would be good as well. I was telling you earlier about the Dead Man's Hand Revisited. I want to perform it for you. Most people have a passing familiarity with the legend of Wild Bill Hickok, and they know that he played his final game of poker out in Deadwood, right before he got shot. It was a game of 5-card poker, and it started like most games with him being dealt a whole card. Now, a lot of other people recognize that his hand that he was dealt was the dead man's hand, which, as most people know, means aces and eights. So of course he had one ace and one 8. But to get to the dead man's hand, you need both pairs, so you need actually 2 aces and 2 8s. What most people don't realize is why Wild Bill got shot. It wasn't because he had the dead man's hand. In fact, it was because he switched cards. You see, instead of having the dead man's hand of aces and 8s, he actually was holding a handful of jacks. And that wasn't really even the problem. The problem was that he had 5 jacks. And that is the legend of Wild Bill Hickok. I will post a link down in the description below so that you can find and buy this volume easily. I hope you'll check it out. As always, if there are any questions that I didn't get to, I hope you'll drop a comment down below, because you know I am an open book. Until next time, my erudite friends, keep reading.